Your Creative Push, episode 307.
That's all you have to do, really. That first step is kind of the easiest, most difficult, and the most important step.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Sophie Gamand. Sophie is a French award-winning photographer and animal advocate living and working in New York. And she comes on the show today for a killer episode. She shares so much about her initial journey into creativity, the many different things that she did before she got into photography, such as art law, opera singing, and creating a photography magazine, and then how she moved to New York to start with a clean slate. Sophie talks about deciding to tackle the thing that scared her the most, taking photographs of strangers, and then her visit to a vet clinic and the photography of a bulldog that was the catalyst for her new body of work. She also talks about the way in which we come full circle back to the things that we were interested in as children and the question of where she would have been had she been encouraged to do exactly what she loved. She was held back by her overly critical father. Sophie also talks about the journey that she went on in making her new book, Pitbull Flower Power, and how she had to face a fear of her own, having been mauled by a dog when she was younger. And she also talks about the bad reputation that pit bulls have and how she's attempting to change that with her book. She also discusses how working with shelter dogs has affected her creative process and how she was rejected by publishers for her book despite the enormous amount of traction that it had received on social media, and how she had to use Kickstarter to fund the book, and a little bit about that journey. And also the other creative outlets that her photography has led her to, such as writing and creating these amazing flower crowns for the dogs. And finally, Sophie talks about some of her creative resistances of being frustrated with the feeling that she doesn't belong in a specific type of creative box, the importance of taking that easy yet very difficult first step, and also taking a step back to get perspective of the impact of your creative contribution after years of working on it. And finally, the positive and negatives of the goalposts constantly moving for creative people. Woo! A lot of things in this episode. Sophie really goes deep into her own creative process and some of the pitfalls and also the great joy that can come from diving deep into a specific creative realm. I had so much fun talking with Sophie, and this was one of the most inspiring conversations that I had, so please sit back and enjoy my conversation with photographer Sophie Gamand. Sophie, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
No, I'm super excited to chat with you because you are doing something that's near and dear to my heart. I love dogs. Me and my wife, it's one of our greatest passions, our dogs, our little fur babies. And every dog we see when we're out, we're just like, babe, look at that dog. Look at that dog. And we especially love pit bulls as well. So your project is very, very special to me. So I'm very excited to get into all that.
Thanks.
Before we do, though, I was hoping maybe you could lay the groundwork and tell us how you got to this point you are now, creatively speaking, like how you got into photography and that story.
Oh, wow. That's a long story. I'm going to try and condense it.
Okay.
I guess, like any creative, I've always been creative. It's just that I was not sure it could become a career. I wasn't sure it could be a full-time activity. So growing up, I tried a bunch of different arts, writing poetry, painting, sculpture, everything I could. Photography became something when I was a teenager, and actually, I got my first camera when I was 10, so earlier than that. I love taking photos, but I grew up with a very, very overly critical, narcissistic father. And he kind of killed a lot of my creative drives because everything I did was never good enough, and he was very, very critical. So photography kind of fell through for me because I wasn't feeling very encouraged. But back then I was already taking photos of animals, and I felt that deep connection. Taking portraits of animals was something that made me feel less lonely, less isolated. I was a super lonely child. I felt like nobody understood me. So animals were really my safe place. So yeah, I tried a bunch of different things. After high school, I decided I wanted to study the fine arts. And my father said, you need a real job. You could always do the art on the side. So why don't you study something serious like law? So I ended up
Very
studying
serious.
law. Yeah, I ended up studying law. I was the only kid in my family that had any propensity for, serious studies. All my siblings dropped out of school at 16. I was the only one that was going through the motions. It's not like I loved school, but I was good at it, and I was just like a good girl, basically.
Mhm.
So I signed up for law, and I did 5 years. I have a master's degree in law, and I was fortunate enough that the last year, the university I was studying in France created a new diploma that was dedicated to art law. So basically studying the art market, all the, tax related to art, galleries, museums, artists. And so I figured, oh, cool, that way I can be a lawyer or working in the law department, but with back in the art a little bit.
Interesting.
And so that was actually such a lucky turn of events because I was miserable. I was not made for, the law world and all that. So after university, I was like, damn, what am I going to do now? And I got a job for an organization in Switzerland that's affiliated to the UN. Basically, I thought I would become a diplomat. I love the idea of justice and, righting the wrongs in the world and defending widows and orphans. And I felt like I had what it took for it. So although I had my art law degree, I became more of a jurist for international law and trying to save the world. That didn't work out very well because I quickly realized that nobody really cared about saving the world in these organizations. It was all about the paycheck, and there was so much red tape.
Oh,
So,
such a shame.
yeah, that was a bummer. So I wasn't super happy, but I made good money and I saved. I lived very cheaply. So I had a very small, cheap apartment and I didn't spend a lot of money. And I figured, I was going to put a lot of money aside to figure out my next move. In parallel to that, I started studying opera singing. I figured, hey, I'll become an opera singer. And so I did that for almost 10 years, I think. So I sang opera. It was very hard. And I guess after a couple of years, I wasn't happy anymore. But because I had a very good voice and kind of natural abilities for it, I was pushed a lot by my coaches, my family, my friends, my network. And so I tried to convince myself that this is what I wanted. But truthfully, in hindsight, I didn't want it anymore. So in parallel to working for this organization, singing opera, I launched a photo magazine. I know it's a very complicated story.
I love it.
So my father, my nemesis, had created a very successful French magazine dedicated to contemporary painting. So I wanted to become a painter. So obviously he became an expert in painting. So he could really, show me how shitty my paintings were. So I'm simplifying the story there. But, when you look back at it, it feels a little like that. So he became this amazing expert. He helped a lot of artists come out, and he wrote beautifully about amazing painters. And I always wanted to work with him, but that was a territory I couldn't touch because it was his. So one day I approached him and I said, could I create a sister magazine to yours that would be dedicated to contemporary photography? And he said, yeah, sure, run with it, which was an amazing gift because then, I didn't have to carry the financial burden of it. And so I created this magazine and I ran it for 5 years until I moved to the States, and then I was done with it. So I just folded it. But for 5 years, I interviewed amazing photographers from all around the world, from really big names to, 18-year-old kids that nobody had heard about. And I loved doing it. I loved hearing the stories, the struggle. I loved hearing the different paths in life. And back then, I wasn't really creating anymore myself because I was caught into singing opera and working and trying to make money and, interviewing all these artists. And so reading and hearing all these stories, was actually so inspiring because I think it made me realize, oh my God, these people are just struggling just like everybody else. all these huge names that I would interview for the magazine. I would go very personal in my interviews. I would go very deep and personal, and I would unearth all these wounds and insecurities and fears from these huge artists. And that was a mind-blowing revelation to me, because I always thought I was shitty, I was insecure, and I always thought artists that make it surely must have a big ego and a very, healthy ego. And so, of course, I was never going to be able to be an artist. But interviewing these people and realizing that from the big name to the little ones, everybody actually went through the same thing, the same process and fears, that was the most liberating thing ever. And around that time, I picked up a camera again and I started taking photos. It was my first experience with digital photography. I discovered Photoshop and I just, started going crazy with it, creating montage and a lot of self-portrait, very dark stuff. And it was super cathartic for me. I should have done therapy instead, but I did art and it was great. And he helped me through a lot. I met my husband through it. He saw my work online, and back then it was on Flickr, which was,
sure, before
Instagram was the place to be for photographers. I met him on there. He saw my dark stuff and he was like, "Who is this woman?" And then I was like, "Oh, this guy, I don't know. He seems so nice. I don't know if I want a nice guy." But then in the end, it worked out. So, fast forward, we moved to New York together in 2010. And, I started with a clean slate. I moved to New York. I left everything. I stopped the magazine. I stopped singing opera. I cut ties a little bit with my family because of the distance. And because they're terrible, they don't want to get on the phone. So I never get to see them or speak to them. And it was the best thing that happened to me. Then I was here in New York with a clean slate and no friends, no family except my husband. And just like all the room I had to spread my wings and just figure out, what am I going to do now? Who am I going to be? And that was scary as hell, but also very exciting. And so, I just had my camera. I had a camera. And I had no idea what to do with it. So I figured, what's the thing that scares me the most? And how can I tackle that? And the thing that scared me the most was to take photos of strangers. And I figured, New York is the street photography place. Like, if I can't take a street photography experience here, then what am I doing in New York, right. It's the place to do it. So I figured I'm going to, face that fear and just go for it. So I, maybe like a month after we moved here, actually, I found a small photography course. At that point, I was almost broke, to be honest. So I didn't have a lot of money left from my savings from my good days in Geneva. So I had a little bit of money left, and I figured I'm gonna take the cheapest course I can find and try and meet people and see what catalyst that could be. And I found back then there was a school that I think since closed actually, that was in Brooklyn, and they offered this street photography course. So I took that, and our first assignment was go in your neighborhood and find a stranger and document them in 5 photos. And I was like, oh my God, this is no. I was dying inside. I was so scared. My English was okay, but it was nowhere near as what it is now. Obviously, I'm French, and I couldn't have a conversation with an American. I mean, that was like not in my skill set yet.
Right.
And I had just moved. I didn't even know the name of my street yet. I didn't even know how to get back home if I walked a couple of blocks from home. Everything was so new and scary, like the way people drive, the color of the street signs, the food you find in stores, like nothing was familiar. And here I was with the only familiar thing I had was my camera. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I need to woman up and see what I can do with this. So I went out of my apartment down into the street, and my heart was beating. I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do? How am I going to talk to someone and take photos of someone you don't know? Like, it felt so intrusive. And actually, just around the corner from my building, this guy approached me, and he was dressed in green from head to toes. Like, he had a green hat and a green jacket and green pants and green shoes. And he stopped in front of me and he said, "Do you want to take my photo?" And
Ooh.
I just panicked. And I said, I don't know. I mean, maybe, yeah, sure. And then I took his post for me and I took the photo. And he started telling me his life. He's like, I'm coming out. There's a psychiatric center upstairs here, and I'm just coming out of there, and it's great. And I'm like, oh, great, good for you. Have a good day. And I just walked away. I was so petrified. The universe just handed this to me
On a silver platter.
on a silver platter with a little bow on it, and I chickened out. And I walked away, and I was like, I'm such a piece of shit. Oh my God, I can't believe I didn't do this. Oh, I can't believe this guy was talking to me. All I had to do is listen and take photos and I would have been done. And I was self-loathing, which I do very well. And
Me too.
I think all creatives are very good.
Yeah, you're not alone there.
I just walked a couple more blocks and there was a vet clinic. And I thought, vet clinic, that could be a good way to bridge the relationship between those strangers and myself, because then we would have the animal as a third party into the conversation. So I don't have to focus on the humans so much. I can talk to them through the animals. It seemed like a good fit. So I pushed the door of that vet clinic and I said, hi, with my camera in my hand. Could I take photos of the work you do here, the animals? And they were like, why? What? Just taking a class. And they were like, just wait in the waiting room and we'll talk to the owner. And I sat in the waiting room. And there was a dog there that was, I guess the owner were paying after their visit. And so they were at the front desk. And the dog just looked at me. And it was like this suspended moment. The dog looked like a little boy at the dentist. He looked so scared. So out of place. It was a bulldog with this amazing blue eyes. And he looked so worried. And I just snapped the photo there. And that really triggered everything else. Because in that moment, I was like, oh my God, how unnatural are all these things for dogs? What are we doing? We're taking an animal and we're placing them in a big city like New York. We bring them to the vet. We put a leash on them. Like all these controlling, subduing things that we do to dogs. And it was just like this moment of, I need to explore this. And how can I explore this? And, I talked to the owner of the vet clinic and then they were like, oh, sure, just, take some photos and leave. And I ended up becoming very good friends with them. And I spent a couple of years I would pop in at the clinic anytime I wanted and just shadow them, and they let me photograph surgeries in the end. I mean, it was great, and we became good friends. And through them, I met my first rescuer as well. And I realized there was a whole world of animal rescue and shelter dogs in New York. And that just, propelled me into taking photos of shelter dogs, which is basically what you want me to talk about. It only took me half an hour to get there.
No, but oh man, what I love about that story is like you've done so much. And at the very beginning, it was almost like you forgot about the fact that you had a camera when you were 10, I think you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like back then, it was just you got along with animals so much more than humans, and it's like when you ended up in New York, it's like this complete cleaning of the slate, and it's like just back to the basics, and it's just you, the camera, and the animals. And do you kind of see that green guy as like, the universe is like handing you that on a silver platter, but also like, do you kind of see it as like maybe it was there to show, the green guy was there to show you that the dichotomy of how awkward or how weird you feel talking with humans, and then just down the street then you go and it's just like this easy relationship that you can have with animals where there's not that awkwardness of diving deep into their story, where you can tell the story with just simply taking a photograph.
Yeah, no, I think in that moment, I felt like I had failed. But with hindsight, when I looked at the photos, I was like, that's not a bad portrait. And it showed me that even though I was super scared of that process, I was still able to take a photo. And yes, I walked away, but it was baby steps. I don't think it was a failure in the end. And yes, it showed me that difference between working with humans versus working with animals. The other thing too is that the vet clinic had the same green front And so it's possible too that it caught my eye because I had all that green in my eye already. I had just been informed, so there's so many ways. One thing I would say though, just to go back to the idea of, when I was 10, I was already taking photos of animals. I often think how we should trust our inner child more when it comes to our creative process. I feel like as children, we know where our truth is. And that's something I've learned from my path and my journey. Sometimes I try to revisit things that I enjoyed doing as a kid or themes that spoke to me back then. And I'm like, as an adult, how can I reinvestigate those themes? And it seems to me that we always come full circle creatively. And somehow, I don't know, as a kid, I feel like there's so many things that I intuitively knew that I wanted to do. And when I look at photos that I took back then, actually, they're very similar to what I do now. Of course, I improved my skills a little bit, but the way I pose the animals, what I'm looking for in that moment, it's very similar. I actually found also photos I took of my bunny when I was probably between 10 and 15, maybe 12, 13, something like that. And I had put a background fabric, and I had put a little hair clip on her head, to like, so it was funny. It was like, wow, this is like the origin of flower power, my series of, pit bulls wearing flower crowns. It's so interesting. I think as kids, we need to pay attention to our little inner child and what that child was doing in terms of creative journey and art and ideas and what we were drawn to back then.
I could not agree more. It's happened to me for sure. And it's interesting always. You forget that thing until you get back to it. I've had these experiences with different writing projects, with different creative things that I've done. I'm in the middle of doing it, and all of a sudden I get this flash of a memory when I was a kid doing something very similar, almost like laying the groundwork. But it's like you almost completely forget about that. And in between, you have all of these maybe things that you do either to distract yourself from that original thing that you love to do, or something that you are maybe told to do by your father, or your parents, or your teachers, that this is the real way to make it. So you almost have to like forget about these initial like creative childlike wonders that you have in order to make it in the real world, so to speak. And then it always seems to come full circle. And then that's when you find your true happiness, is when you get back to that thing that you originally loved to do.
Isn't it insane, though, how as children we're molded by teachers and parents and society, to be something else? Like, I wonder what would have happened to me in my creative career had my parents encouraged what I really wanted to do, like study the fine arts, for example, instead of going for law studies. Like, I wonder, would that have made a difference in my path and how I don't know, the type of creative I became, or would it have killed it? As creatives, do we need to go through that fire a little bit to find ourselves again, despite all odds?
Right.
Is that part of the process? Like, those are, I think, interesting questions.
Yeah, I think it's important to go through that fire, and sometimes to see the other side, to meet that green person and realize what you don't want to do. Sometimes it's very important, and also it kind of shapes you into who you are. Do you find that you still, to this day, as you've built a successful career, built a successful following, doing something that I know that is very important to the world and actually making a difference, do you find that voice maybe from your father, where he's super critical and you feel like you're never good enough, does that still kind of seep in?
I am, like I said earlier, a very self-loathing type of person. So I think those demons, those inner voices that work against you, I think they're part of what it is to be a creative. I don't know that I will ever get rid of them. I'm working on that because I came to realize that I was not as happy and fulfilled as I could be, that those voices were becoming too destructive. So I started a therapy, and I found this amazing therapist who works with artists a lot. And it's been an amazing process to kind of reclaim that power over those voices and just realize that those voices are not you, that father voice. It's not even your father's voice at that point, it's just all that negative and all the criticism and the censor. And it's one of the biggest challenge when you're creative. How do you manage those voices? and how do you shut them down? Because you can't get any work done as long as those voices are there.
Right. And I wonder, do you have a way of handling the good voices? Well, sometimes the good voices aren't that great, but I think it is important to have some sort of criticism and to know when you're not doing your best work, or if maybe you're doing something that's not working, and kind of trusting those voices that are guiding you in the right direction. Versus the voices that are saying like you're no good piece of shit and you should stop doing art. That definitely don't deserve to be there. How do you have you found a way to kind of balance those?
I think it comes down to kindness. You know, the voice that wants you to succeed is going to be kind to you. It's going to say, wow, you know, that painting, I'm so glad you took a chance on that color or that shape or that technique. You know, I think you need to keep exploring that. That's the kind voice. That's a critic that's like, yeah, you've got this. And now let's just go back to work and make it better and we'll get there. You know, if the voice is like, oh, damn, oh, man, no, I told you not to use that color. Oh, my God, that technique. Like, how dare you even try it? You're not there yet. If that voice is not kind, then you know it's the demon speak. I mean, when I say demon, I don't mean in a religious way, but I just mean that right. Mean voice that's trying to destroy you, you know. You know that voice is, flush it down the toilet, just ignore it. So I would say with me, that process that I'm working on now is that kindness to myself. And very often when those mean voices chime in, I realize I'm back to being a powerless kid. And so I'm trying to talk to myself as an adult and be like, hey, I'm an adult now. You know, you can't torture me like you used to torture me when I was a kid. Because when you're a kid, you're so powerless that the father's voice, you know, everything is too much to handle. So you end up dimming your light. You end up not doing the things you really want to be doing because you think you're not good enough. As an adult, you can be like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not good enough now, but everybody started somewhere. I'm going to get there. You know, as an adult, you have more agency over your life. And I think that's the work I'm trying to do now, is to kind of differentiate when I'm this powerless kid again, because something triggered me, something brought me back to that place. And, I'm in a place where I want to die because the world seems too much. The art seems never good enough. I need to differentiate that moment from the adult that is in full power of, you know, their destiny and the work they're doing.
Exactly. You're in control of your own life. You're in control of your own creativity. You're in control of your own thoughts and where you go. So it's important to trust that adult and tell that child, thank you for the childlike wonder, but it's time to get serious.
Oh, well, not necessarily. You know, I would say, thank you for that child wonder. I'll take it.
Right.
But maybe more like, I know you're scared. I know this is so scary, you know, but we have more tools now. We have more agency than we had back then when we were little. So I'll protect you now. You know, I know what to do to keep you safe. And I know what to do to make this work. I think that's what you need to tell your inner child. And actually, it's not a bad exercise to, when you hear those voices that are so negative and crucifying you, it's not a bad idea to just actually talk to yourself in your head and just say, like, you know, in your head, you go, hello, hey, I'm Sophie. I know what's happening here. Like, I know exactly what's going on. You've been triggered, but everything's going to be okay. Just let me take charge for a little while. You know, hug your child in your head. Like, actually have that conversation. I found it very soothing. Obviously, when I'm triggered and I'm like, oh, my work is shit, it's very hard to access that voice and that soothing feeling. But I think the more you exercise it, the more powerful it becomes. And at the end of the day, it's about reassuring that kid that's scared shitless.
Right. Because obviously, you know, sometimes that scared shitless child is trying to tell you something that you need to know as well. I like to journal. I like to write and literally have those conversations with myself. Like, hey, young man, what's going on? What are we scared of today? Like, what's our biggest fear? Like, being able to flesh it out in that way, I think is so helpful. And I highly recommend it, whether you're a writer or not, to be able to, or talk out loud to yourself if you want. Just make sure nobody's around to hear you.
Yeah, I find it very hard to journal, but the few times I've done it in my life was very powerful. It's just that it's very hard for me to snap out of it. I'm more like roll in a ball under the cover and cry, sob like a baby. So, yeah.
Well, well, speaking of like, helping the innocent, helping somebody that can't help themselves, let's get back into specifically what you're doing now, taking photographs of dogs. Can you tell us like kind of how that journey has taken you to your new book now, Pitbull Flower Power?
Yeah. So after I moved to the US in 2010, I became aware of the amount of dogs that were in shelters, and the whole rescue industry, I would call it. And I started volunteering for a local rescue. And for the first time, I took photos of stray dogs, and and the whole rescue process. And I've learned so much. I got like a crash course in 2 intensive years of learning the ins and outs of rescue. And I started volunteering also for animal shelters. I would take portraits of their animals to help them get adopted. I realized most of the shelters back then had horrible photos, like really bad photos. The animals always looked scared, or they had like crazy eyes, or they looked filthy. And it just seemed to me like we need to bring animal shelters to the 21st century and to a sexy, glamorous imagery. So that was kind of my starting point on how can I turn these dogs into these glamorous photos where people will see the photos and be like, oh my God, that dog is ready to move in like yesterday. Let's just grab him, And I wanted to create those emotional connections. So I started, volunteering in animal shelters, and that was really awesome. I think what was great for me as a creative is that it was kind of a low-key pressure because it was not like a client. My client were the animals, basically. And I worked with shelters at first that didn't euthanize their animals. So they had all the time, the photos, whether the photos were going to work out or not, it was not a pressure at that time because I could explore, I could try things. The dog was not going to be euthanized. Now it's a little different because I work sometimes with shelters that euthanize. And so when my models are euthanized, it's pretty, it's pretty horrific to deal with. But back then it was kind of a safe approach. There was no client. I wasn't paid for the job, which was amazing because then I didn't feel like I had to succeed.
That pressure.
I still pressured myself, obviously, because I wanted to do the best work possible. But back then I didn't feel like I deserved to be paid, as an artist. So this was a great way to do it, volunteering for a nonprofit. And I learned so much. And one thing, became very apparent is that I was afraid of big, jumpy dogs, and particularly pit bulls. At the shelter I volunteered here in New York, each time they would bring their pit bulls to the set, the dogs would be jumpy and make grunting noises, and they had so much muscles, and they seemed out of control in a way. That reminded me of an episode when I was 12 or 13, I think. I was mauled by a big dog back in France, and it was a pretty traumatic event. The dog attacked me, and I really went for it. And I think it left me a little scared around big, jumpy dogs that I felt were out of control. And so even though the dogs are, leashed during the photo shoot at the shelter, there's no like minimum risk involved because the staff knows what they're doing and the dogs are not dangerous. But deep inside me, there was that 12, 13-year-old girl that was like, we're going to get killed. So I was afraid of pit bulls, and also because of all the things I had heard about them. And after a few months, I guess, of maybe a year of volunteering, I realized how unfair it was for me to be afraid of these dogs that had never done anything to me. It was prejudiced. It was stupid. It was limiting my work because, they would bring the dog and I'd be like, snap, snap. Okay, next dog. I would not give my best. I would not touch the dog. I would not interact with the dog. And I felt I was not doing them justice, So I decided to confront that fear. The best way I knew how was to create a photo project that would, force me to interact with these dogs and be very intimate with them. So I figured, okay, maybe I could, how can I photograph them in a way that will help me, overcome my fear, but also others. And I back then I was tired of taking photos and being on the computer retouching all the time. So I wanted to glue things together. I wanted to paint, and I wanted to be a little more tactile with my creative process. So I figured, how about if I build flower crown and put them on these dogs, to create portraits that were so different from anything we'd seen before. Nobody expected a pit bull to be portrayed in such a soft manner. So my idea was, okay, I'm going to completely challenge the way we're used to seeing these dogs, and challenge myself and have fun with it. Just gluing flowers together, have fun. So I figured I'm just going to do like 5-7 images, a quick little series over the summer, and then move on to my next project. That was 4 years ago. Yeah, that worked out great.
Good job sticking to that plan.
Yeah. So, yeah. It got so popular from the first moment. The first images, went on Facebook. I think one of the first group of images I released had like 9 million views.
Oh my God.
I mean, it literally overnight propelled me into the role of a pitbull advocate, first off, which I was like, I don't know about this. Because
I was just facing my fears, guys.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't even know if I like the damn dogs. And so all of a sudden I'm propelled into the role of a pitbull advocate. And also my work is being like scrutinized as if I had planned all along to become famous for this work, and now I was ready for the criticism. I'm still this shy artist trying things out. But in the mind of people, it's like I made this conscious decision of saying this about pit bulls. And so all of a sudden I had haters and lovers and people that praise me like God on earth, and people that, call me to tell me I'm going to die. And it was insane. And that was summer 4 years ago. So 4 years in, it's become my full-time activity, full-time job, taking portraits of shelter dogs and pit bulls in flower crowns in particular. I have about almost, I think, 500 portraits in the series by now, which is kind of insane. I made probably 800, 900 crowns since I started. And so 4 years in, I decided, okay, now it's time to do a book. And the series has been super, super popular. Like really, videos about my work have like 15 million views, and it's been insane. It's been published all over the world, and I have a lot of followers, that want to see more of this work. So really like a super major success online. Yet when I approached publishers, they were like, we don't really think this is super commercial.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah. I was told that this work was not commercial. And I'm like, dudes, like, can you peel off, the layers of bullshit in front of your eyes and like just have a look at Facebook lately? Because it was all over Facebook.
Wait, and you had published before, correct?
Yeah,
Wet Dog?
I had published Wet Dog before. So I was a published author. And
wow.
The Wet Dog publisher was like, nah, we don't really like, pit bulls. Like, we don't feel like it's going to sell, whatever. So all my amazing publishers that have always wanted to work with me were like, no. There was one of them, a really big publisher that had been asking me to do this book for years. So I figured easy peasy, they'll just give an offer. So I contacted them and they were like so excited. The whole team was like, oh my God, yes, let's do this. And then they brought the project up to their big boss and they presented it. And the big boss said, no.
Wow.
She said she had something against, quote, dressing up dogs. And I was like, okay, first, this is not dressing up dogs. It's very different.
It's beautifying them.
Yeah. To me, it was about giving them their dignity back.
Sure.
It was not like putting a tutu on them and bunny ears. I mean, it was shattering to spend all these months, being rejected when I thought this was going to be a walk in the park. And then I got a publisher that really wanted the project, but they offered me a shit deal. Like, it was going to be insane. They wanted me to sign over all the rights of the series to them. They would even get a cut of prints I would sell in galleries. And then they would give me like 5% royalties on the books. Like, the shittiest deal you've ever been dealt. And so for a few weeks, I really pondered, like, should I just go for it? Because I really thought this book was important. I thought this book needs to happen and nobody else wants it. So I almost signed the deal, but there was a part of me that was like, no, damn, this is my heart, my baby. I worked 4 years for this project. I didn't want to just sign it over to somebody else. And so I decided to say no to that deal. And it was a horrible process because I liked the people and they were not very nice when I said no. You know, they were angry and
damn humans.
Damn humans, you know, they didn't say, oh, you poor little artist. We understand you. We'll let you have it your way. You deserve it. No, they were like, oh, we invested so much time and effort into this already. So it was hard. I fell into a big depression back then. The book fell through, and then I was supposed to have a big exhibit in Los Angeles that fell through at the same time. And for a few months, I was like knocked down. And it was hard, you know, to find a new sense of direction and where do I go from here? And then a year later, I found a friend of mine said, well, have you ever heard of Lantern? They're a publisher, they're in your neighborhood, they're vegan, they specialize in artists with animal causes. And I'm like, wait, what? So I approached that local publisher and they loved the work. And they said, of course, we'll help you. But I still had to fund the book. And so basically I would keep all the rights to the project, but I had to fund it myself. So I ended up doing a Kickstarter. And it took me months to finally launch the Kickstarter because I thought nobody's going to want it. It's going to be so hard. I need so much money because it's going to be a big coffee table book. It's so expensive to make. And I have to pay a designer and, I had to pay an entire team basically of people on top of printing the book. And it was scary. And then I launched a Kickstarter. And I think it was funded in like 1 day.
Oh my God.
And then I tripled the amount. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm going to stop promoting this Kickstarter because I don't know that I want to sell more books than this.
Right.
So I actually didn't even do press for it. I didn't even push it really. I only shared it on my social media and then, a couple of articles, people that follow my work, did articles and stuff, but Kickstarter featured it as well. But that was it. I didn't really go full out with it. I was super shy about it. And I still tripled the amount. And yeah, now the book is being printed. Actually, just before our phone call, I received the last proofs in an envelope right here on the table next to me.
Yeah.
And I have to open it, check it, approve it, and then the books are going to be bound, basically. So the covers and the books are already printed, and they're just waiting for that final approval to say, yes, you can bond the books together. Let's do this.
Hey, congrats.
So I'm about to see the book in...
Oh my gosh, it's like Christmas morning.
No! It's like hell on earth. I don't want to open the envelope.
You must open it.
No!
No, but congratulations, obviously. And it also, that story makes me so happy because it just proved, the people, the gatekeeper, so to speak, they don't know what they're talking about a lot of the time. And what you have inside of you and the idea that is important and needs to be out there.
Yeah.
Probably does for anybody listening.
I think also, social media is the greatest thing that's ever happened to artists. I mean, especially female artists, because it used to be a fat guy with a cigar sitting behind a big desk telling you, yes, you may be an artist and I'll take 70% of everything you do.
Right.
And now it's like, fuck you, it just have your own platform, you run it the way you want it. I've had a couple of experiences with galleries and each time it's been a nightmare. Like one of them literally ran with my money and my prints. Never saw a cent, never saw the prints back. It's just a nightmare. But selling in direct has been amazing. I have people from who really want to buy my work and they will reach out to me and they basically say, which image do you think I should buy? They don't even really care. Well, they care obviously of what they're getting, but they want to support and they love the work. They love the mission. And that's amazing.
Yeah, and social media is so great for the dogs themselves too, especially when they have an advocate like you or somebody that can write their story, somebody that can really share it out because all it takes is that image to be put out there and then you look in the comments and you just see somebody commenting and all they're doing is tagging their, somebody that they think that dog could end up in their home. Like it's such an important. I was on the Paw Print podcast as well. I know that you were on with Harold and Nancy, and that's something that I try to promote to creative people that are in your field, is just finding that special way that you can promote that animal, that you can be their human advocate, that you can give them that voice and give them that way of getting out there in the world. And social media is so great for that.
You know what's interesting too is sometimes I will share a dog and I'm like, ugh, who's going to want this dog? Like, the bio is kind of lame. I feel like the dog, has slobber or something that I'm like, ugh, I would never adopt this dog. No, I sound cruel, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't have that emotional connection so much. I'm like, oh, this dog is, oh, that photo is, and then people go crazy for it. And each time it happens, it reminds me, oh my God, it's not like I need to trust the process. Even if I feel like my photo is not good enough or the dog was looking weird, or it doesn't matter, because we don't all have the same taste. We don't all want the same thing from a dog or a photo. And to just put all these things out there, I think working with shelter dogs actually has been great for my creative process, in the sense that I used to be so controlling of what I put out there. With these dogs, it's more important to me to put them out there, even if I feel like the photo is not what I wanted, because the dog life sometimes is on the line, often. And it's been amazing, because then I would put some images out there that if it was a fine art series, I would probably have edited out, and then people respond to it and the dog gets adopted because of that photo. And I'm like, damn, wow. Okay. I guess I don't know everything.
Right.
So I'm very controlling with my art, I guess, because of my upbringing and how harsh critics were growing up. So now I want to make sure I leave as little room for critique as possible. And working with shelter dogs has forced me to just shatter that narrative that I'm telling myself on the shoot. I never know what I'm going to photograph that day. It could be a tiny fluffy black dog. It could be a big white pit bull. It could be a dog with 3 legs or 1 eye. I just never know. And I just bring my camera, my equipment, and I sit there and I wait for the dogs to come in. And I'm like, okay, what can we do with you? And that's been amazing.
Absolutely. Well, and for the book, do you write the stories as well? Like, do you tell the story of the dog?
Yeah. So for, the book is a big coffee table book. So it was primarily meant to be a photo book. Because like I said, I have 500 portraits in the series, and I felt it'd be nice to have one place where a lot of them are combined. And then I realized, those stories are so powerful. I need to tell some of the stories. And I ended up writing way too many stories, so that a lot of them got chopped in the editing room. But the book still has a whole bunch of stories. It's a mix of a little bit of my experience. Sometimes it's about when I went to that shelter and the experience I had being in that shelter, and that particular dog, and the story. It goes from the dog being found to the dog being adopted. Sometimes the stories are about the adopter and the dog, and how post-adoption have they've managed the challenges that, appeared. All the stories are very different. They show the very wide spectrum of situations and stories, and every dog is different. Every situation is different. It's been amazing, working on these stories. I have the heart of a writer, and so being able to finally write stuff and be proud of putting them into a book form has been a dream. Like, it's been really amazing. I can't wait for people to read those stories, because, obviously on social media, everything has to be short and quick. For the book, I was able to interview the rescuers, the adopters, and dive into the really deep corners of every story. And it's been pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I just love that you have done everything, basically, from, like you said, writing the story. Like, that's one creative thing. Obviously, taking the photographs is another creative thing. Creating these beautiful flower crowns, that's another creative thing. Like, have you developed your skills as like a flower crown creator? Like, how's that process been?
Yeah, you know what? This is an interesting conversation too, because as a creative, sometimes, especially when I'm like in a darker mood, I cry and I think, why can't I know what I want to be? Do I want to be a flower artist? Do I want to be a photographer? Do I want to save dogs? Do I want to be a painter? Do I want to be a writer? What is it? And it's so depressing because I feel like I don't belong anywhere. I've always felt like I never belonged. And as an artist, I look at other amazing artists on Instagram or in galleries, and they seem to know, I'm sure they don't, but on paper, they seem to have found that niche and they know what they're doing and how they want it. And I'm like, I'm longing for that. I want a box. Just put me in a damn box. I want my own box, and I want to be safe in it, and I want to know exactly where the boundaries of that box are, and I want to create within those boundaries. The reality, of course, is that I want to do everything. So I'm cursed in that way. And with that project, Flower Power, it's been amazing because, yes, I've been able to create those flower things. I had never used a glue gun before I started this project. I had never worked with flowers. I was completely clueless. My first flower crowns, I was like, how the hell am I going to attach them on the head of the dogs, and how are they going to stay on? And where am I going to find flowers that I can use? The first flower crowns were so bad. Oh my God. I mean, it doesn't show.
That's the way it always is.
Yeah. But yeah, they were they were like just a couple of flowers, and it was like wonky. And then, they got bigger and more elaborate. And my last crown, which I made for a very special dog that I helped rescue from Mexico, my little Frida girl, her name was Frida too. So the queen of flower crowns, she needed something special, and she was paralyzed. She couldn't use her back legs, and she was my baby girl. I would have adopted her if I could. I decided to create a very, very special crown for her, which I felt was kind of going to be maybe my last crown. I felt ready to take a break on the project a little bit. So I made this amazing crown for her that's huge, and it has pom-poms, and it's bedazzled, and it has gold, and it's my favorite crown. And I feel like it's probably going to be a bridge to my next project because I've felt like I've wanted to work on a new project for a long time. I've created a lot of headpieces actually for a new project I wanted to shoot. It's just never felt right, like the right time, the right recipe. So I've held off on a little bit, and I'm so busy with Flower Power that I haven't been able to do it. But I think Frida and that particular portrait, that might be, a little stepping stone. Yeah. She's in the book. Her story is in the book. I'm super excited to tell her story. And
well, I heard her story on the Paul Print podcast, so we'll link that up for people to listen if they want to hear about Frida in the show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/Sophie. But yeah, it's so interesting then how these kind of projects have this like lifespan, whether it's for some people a month, some people a year, some people 4 years, some people a decade, some people a lifetime. You go from that first flower crown where you're just like, okay, this makes sense, let me try this, and it's like this thing that catapults and sparks this whole journey that you go on, and then you can kind of graduate to this like king crown, this or queen crown, this like kind of ultimate thing that you create, and then that in turn, you have this book, this ultimate thing that you create as this like, okay, this is the proof of what I've been doing for the past 4 years. And then, of course, you have like all the administrative work that happens afterwards, but you kind of feel in your bones when it's time to move on to the next thing. And it's just waiting for that, those pieces to kind of fall into place.
I think, one of the hardest challenges for creatives is that first step. I know I look like I'm super productive. Like when I have this conversation with other creatives, they're like, what? But you never stop. But I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm not very productive, especially because I've spent the past 4 years on the same project, basically. So I feel like I've failed somehow. But the hardest part is always that first step. We always get into our head. And then I remember every project, I think, what do I need for this? How am I going to build this? Oh, but I don't have the equipment I need. I don't have the dog model I need. There's always all these hurdles, right? But if you actually just pick up the glue gun and the first batch of flowers you were able to find at the dollar store, and you just actually start putting those flowers together, and then you book that first shoot, that's all you have to do, really. That first step is kind of the easiest, most difficult, and the most important step. And I think creatives get in their head, and we find all the excuses not to take that first step, and that's our downfall. You just never know where it's going to go, and that's what Flower Power has taught me too. The past 4 years, I've been really caught into kind of the routine of this project, and also being successful on social media means that you get a bunch of different kind of requests all day long, every day, from, DMs, emails, like it just never stops. And I feel like I'm constantly pulled in a million different directions. And ideally, I want to say yes to everyone and everything, but then I just can't because I don't have enough time in the day. I never take vacations almost. I don't have weekends. I work all the time. I'm constantly on the verge of being completely burned out. And sometimes I burn out for a couple of weeks and I need to just like shut down. It's been like super challenging, exciting, but as a creative, it's also sometimes like it makes you lose sight of where do I really want to go? Like, what do I still want to say? And with Flower Power, I got so caught in the success of it that I haven't had a chance to really think about the next steps. And then sometimes I wake up in sweat and I'm like, oh my God, but this is going to end. Like, there's a day when nobody's going to care about Flower Power. Then what's going to be left of me? Like, who am I going to be after this? And I always envy the artists that seem like they had arrived, And the truth is, you never arrive as a creative. Unfortunately, it does not exist. There's like little landing platform where you can catch your breath a little bit, but it's a journey. Being a creative is a journey, and you have to accept it, and you have to just go for it. When I worked on the book, there was this moment. I was working, I think, on the video for the Kickstarter or something. Suddenly, I just sat back and I looked at it from like a fresh perspective. And it hit me how much I had accomplished. It hit me like how many dogs had been saved through this project, how many people were rooting for this project, all the connections I had made as a creative, how far had become, all the things I had learned on myself, my art, the work, the business, the world, these animals, and
the flower crowns.
The flower crowns. Yeah, I could always become, make flower crowns for weddings. Yeah. I get so many requests from people asking me to make their flower crowns for their weddings. So if that dog thing doesn't work out for me, I have a side gig. But it suddenly hit me. I was like, damn, that's actually a really big accomplishment. That's actually, for a split second, I saw it, I guess, the way other people might see it from the outside. And I was proud. Like, it made me really emotional in a good way. Not sobbing, I'm a piece of shit, but like, wow, this is beautiful. I've achieved something beautiful. And it's such a rare thing in my creative journey to actually have that moment of, oh my God, you actually did it. And you can be proud and you can look at it and yeah.
It's so important, though, to have those moments. I think a lot of people do get caught up in that day-to-day thing where, you're doing the same thing over and over again. You actually feel like you're not doing a lot of work on one hand, but on the other hand, you're getting all these requests and you don't have a free second in your day. You get burnout. As you're going down that journey, you don't really feel like you're making kind of any progress. But then when you can take that step back and try to look at it from an outsider's perspective, you see that you've taken all these photos, you see all the progress that you've made when you look back at your first flower crown or your first photograph, and you can see all the lives that you've changed. Like for me, seeing that I've done 300 episodes, seeing the pile of emails of people that I've written to say it's helped them. Like, you realize that that's the reason you started in the first place, and you actually have this mountain of evidence to show that you have been successful in what you set out to do when you did that first photograph, made that first flower crown, started that first podcast episode, whatever it is. It's so important to have those moments of self-reflection and pat yourself on the back and be, like you said before, trust that kind voice and be kind to yourself and congratulate yourself for how far you've come, so that you can continue to go, either if it's in the same direction to keep powering through, or if it is to branch off into a new direction and start making other positive changes,
Yeah, my husband, always tells me this very wise thing. He said, you need to stop moving the goalpost. And I think as creative, at least it's very true for me, and I'm sure for most creatives out there, we constantly move that goalpost because there's something in us that will never feel like we're enough, that our art is good enough. And that's great, because that's the motivation. That's why we are creatives, because we have that amazing drive, which is a power. But when you keep moving the goalpost, you're just miserable all the time. And that's where, like, how do you find that balance between achieving those goals and celebrating it while keeping your eye on the next goalpost? And for me, it's always like, I don't even remember I did a book. It's coming out in October. It's being printed and put together. And I'm so completely consumed by the exhibit. So I didn't want to just launch the book in October. So I decided to have an exhibit around the book launch. And the exhibit became my all-time consuming project because I decided I don't want to just have the photos printed and framed and hang on the wall. I want to make sculptures, video, augmented reality. I want to do paintings. I want to make a flower installation. It grew into this monster that I've been losing sleep over for months. And part of me is like, why do I do this to myself? I could have just hang the prints on the wall, sign the book, celebrate the book with everyone, and move on with my life. Why do I have to constantly make things harder for myself?
Because you're a creative person.
No, I don't want it anymore. What did I do in a previous life? No, but it's rough. So, and my husband also, he's very, very wise. And he also said, you always find a way to like make the one last percent of a project like even harder.
Right.
You always have to add that last thing,
Sure.
And I think it comes from, I will never feel like what I do or what I am or who I am is enough. And it's an amazing drive and it's my curse. And that's how it is. And I think if we can try to be kind with ourselves and learn that it's part of the game, it's part of our cycles and it's fine. It's what helps us, push our boundaries. Like this particular exhibit, 2 days ago, I was ready to just crash the whole project. Because it's costing me a lot of money. It's a big financial, commitment for nothing really. Because it's not like I'm going to be selling on any of those pieces. I want to create an immersive experience for people. I want them to view the work, but I also want them to experience something. And that kind of artwork, it's not like I can make money off it. So it's basically just a money pit and something that I feel like I have to do, but I don't really know why I'm doing this to myself. And then my husband was like, I don't know, these pieces, I feel like people won't understand them. What are you doing? And I'm like, I don't care if they don't understand them. I have to do them. I need to do them. And I don't know why. Stop asking me.
Yeah. Yeah, we never know why we have to do it. But I think he is right, and something I talk about all the time. When you're a creative person, the goalposts do keep moving, and it's one of those weird experiences because you are making progress, but it doesn't feel like it because you are just now on a bigger field. Like the more and more you progress, like you're just in this bigger arena, and it's just like we were talking about. It's just important to let yourself score sometimes, even though the goalpost is still moving. Like allow yourself to get in the end zone or score a goal or whatever it is. Like to definitely celebrate that and celebrate the fact that you are now on a bigger field and that you do have these bigger and grander goals that you wouldn't have even imagined had you not started, had you not taken that first step.
Well, I'm getting anxiety just hearing you say that.
Oh, no.
I don't want the field to be bigger.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Well, we'll shrink it down. So the exhibit is October 18th to the 21st in Brooklyn?
Yes, it's at the Invisible Dog, which is a perfect place for this because pit bulls are really invisible dogs of the shelter system. And I've exhibited with them before, but this time I'm going to be in their main space, which is this huge industrial, like old factory. So there's very little walls, so everything has to be suspended. And like I've had to be a little creative on how I do this, and it's going to be pretty cool. I think I'm excited to just show it, and then Thursday, there's actually in the evening a private fundraiser for local animal shelters, so people can buy tickets for that and then come hang out and view the exhibit. And then Saturday, October the 20th, between 4 and 7 p.m., I will be launching the book officially. So I'll be signing the book and just meeting people, and people get to see the exhibit, but also hang out and get a book. That's the big day.
Very cool. All right. So we will link that up at today's show notes page. Again, yourcreativepush.com/Sophie. We'll have linked up everywhere you can find Sophie, of course, but also all the details for the exhibit, the book signing, and everything else that is in between. Sophie, it's time for the final push, and this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Oh my God, the pressure.
Well, you've already done it, so.
Yeah, I've done it. No, I would say, I see you, and I know what you're going through. Like I think, all of us, we go through the same thing. I'm trying to be very open to it on my Instagram, and sometimes I feel like, oh, people are going to get bored of how negative I might seem. But it is a struggle, and it's hard. And I think as creatives, we need to be honest with ourselves and our audiences and our peers. It's hard, and that's just how it is, and it's okay. It's also beautiful. It's the best life. I mean, to be able to live as a creative is amazing. Just be kind. Be kind to yourself and celebrate every small steps that you take. Celebrate them. And very often it feels like it's not enough, but trust me, it's enough, because it's all these little rivers that are going to come together at some point. Even a project you started years ago and you gave up on, you can pick up again and make it something new, or making it the same or better, whatever you want. It's a journey, and I think everything's going to be fine in the end.
Beautiful. Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the show, for giving us that inspiration, for sharing your story, and also on behalf of dogs for doing what you do. Last night we were actually over our friend's house, and they have this beautiful pit bull, Monroe. She is the sweetest dog ever. I think until I met her, I didn't realize that I had that stigma too, that negative stigma that is I guess society telling us how evil or how bad pit bulls are.
Unpredictable, and yeah.
And just thank you for facing your fears, that you had a bad experience when you were a child, but you literally faced your fears in the most beautiful and kind way possible, and you're doing so much good for them. So thank you on behalf of dogs everywhere for doing what you do and giving them that voice.
I think, art is about harnessing our fears. And maybe that should have been my last, advice.
Hey, you're still going. You're still going.
But yeah. No, I would say, if something scares you, go for it. As a creative, this is where you need to go. I mean, each time I've faced my fears in my creative career, I've been successful. I've been repaid 1,000,000 times. It's been amazing. And I know it's scary, but go where you're afraid. This is where it pays off. And somehow I feel like it's our instinct telling us, this is where you belong. Mm-hmm. And this is why it's scary. Just go for it. So seriously, look at what scares you the most in your creative practice, or themes, or something you want to explore, and try and find a way to explore it. You'll learn so much. You'll grow so much, and your work will be so powerful.
I love it.
So, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been lovely. Thank you.
It's been so great. And for everybody, you can find Sophie on her website, sophiegamand.com, or on Instagram. She is Sophie Gamand. And again, we'll have everything linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/Sophie. Sophie, thanks again.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Ooh, I told you that was going to be a great episode, and my thanks once again to Sophie for coming on the show, for being so open and honest and vulnerable in this conversation. And I love what she said about everything coming full circle when you're a creative person. So many people that I've talked to in this podcast have referenced that same experience of being super interested in something when you're a little kid, when you can barely remember it, the joy that it brought you, and then somewhere along the line, getting sucked into other things, whether they're distractions or you're just trying something else, and then eventually getting back to that thing that you were originally interested in, and everything coming full circle, and you find that joy again, and you find that kind of creative peace as you get back to that passion. And I think it's the same thing for creative resistances, that the origin of these negative voices, the negative things that you tell yourself in your own head, come from things that you heard, the initial discouragements maybe from adults in your life when you're a kid, or teachers, or wherever else you're hearing it, that they come from that initial shock to the system that you get when you're a kid, and you start to realize that maybe your dreams are too big, that once you become an adult, you won't be able to do this thing that you love from birth. And I think Sophie's advice is completely accurate. You need to trust those kind voices in your head, the voices that want you to succeed, not the voices that want you to feel like you suck, the voices that come from those deep wounds that you received when your dreams were initially dashed. Don't trust those. Trust the voices in your head that give you encouragement and give you positive reinforcement and put you on the right path. And sometimes it does take confronting those fears, as scary as it may seem, confronting that mean dog or confronting your father or confronting your own inner voices that tell you that you suck or that you don't deserve it or that you're not good enough or that you will basically never reach your goal. You need to actually face those fears, whatever those fears may be specifically for you. And sometimes it is as easy as taking that easy/difficult/important first step that Sophie talked about. But take a deep dive and realize where those voices are coming from, where those fears are coming from. Are they coming from you as an adult or are they coming from you as a child? And if you can realize that they are coming from your inner child, they are sometimes much easier to stand up to and to take that first step in confronting them. And if you are going to be in the Brooklyn area on October 18th to the 21st, that's when her exhibit is going on, and the book signing is on October 20th. We'll have all of those details listed for you at yourcreativepush.com/307. On our next episode, we have Fieldy. Fieldy is Hayley Fields. She's an Australian artist and commercial illustrator. She has painted hundreds of murals, canvases, surfboards, and skateboards, as well as many less conventional objects. And she comes on the show for a killer episode. I love her vibe and I love her outlook on the creative process and how she was able to figure out her own style because of the restrictions and restraints that she gave to herself. If you want to find out more about Fieldy, you can head to fieldy.com, or on Instagram, she is Fieldy, F-I-E-L-D-E-Y, or we'll have that again listed at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/307, as well as everything we talked about with Sophie. But that's all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were very inspired to go and get to your creative passions and to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you next week if you need that push again. I love you all so much. Keep creating, keep challenging yourself and confronting your fears and realizing that you are an adult. And many of those voices in your head do come from childhood. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.